Going 360 on the headlines.
It's really well-balanced conversation.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
All right. Joining us this hour is incredible independent content creator and journalist and analyst who's also the founder of Syriana Analysis. Syriana Analysis is an entirely subscriber-funded news and analysis channel, which covers a variety of geopolitical topics with a special interest in, obviously, what's covering and what's happening in Syria. You can support the work both on Patreon and PayPal, and you can follow Kevork Almassian on Twitter. You can find links to all of the places where you can support everything on Twitter at Kevork Almassian, which is KEVORK ALMASSIAN. Hey, Kevork, it's good to speak with you again.
Hello. I'm happy to be with you again.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you as always. So, how's it going? Everything? Are you avoiding the monkeypox? Okay.
If we avoid the monkeypox, then we can't avoid the inflation. Yeah, I just came from a shopping and everything is between 10 to 20% is more expensive, and the salaries are the same. And They are telling us that we have to sacrifice this for Ukraine, and we don't know where this tax money is going, basically.
Right. Isn't that frustrating? Because we're really supposed to believe that the United States and the West actually care about Ukraine. They don't care about Ukraine. They don't care. Ukraine is being used, right?
Using the Ukrainians. They are using them as cannon fodders now. They have used lots of people during the course of at least the past few decades. Let's remember what the CIA did, for example, in Afghanistan, when they invited all the mujahideen from all around the world to come and fight the Soviet Union. And they used them as cannon fodders. They burned them there against the Soviet Union, but apparently they were successful in that combat against the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union collapsed. Similarly, they did in Syria. They invited this mujahideen from all around the world through Turkey, which is a NATO member. And we are speaking about tens of thousands of foreign jihadists. It's not like a few hundred people, right? So it all happened under the watch of the American base, which is they have one of the biggest bases in the world in Turkey. And now it's happening in Ukraine. And they are telling us that, there are so many volunteers are traveling to Ukraine that we cannot really stop them from going to Ukraine because they want to fight alongside the good guys, right? Quote unquote. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are so many former Marines and officers within. They were part of the British and the American armies. They're traveling to Ukraine, and of course, these people have a really big experience. So they're going there as an advisor. Of course, the United States and Britain, they cannot send their soldiers. So this is tacitly they are sending their expertise to the Ukrainian forces. Which among them, they are the neo-Nazis. And this is not a conspiracy theory or a Russian misinformation, as they try really to tell us, because the Azov battalion is part of the National Guard of Ukraine. And the Azov itself, it says we are Nazis. It's not like we are accusing them. They are saying we are waging a holy Semite. They're waging a holy white crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. Untermenschen means subhumans. This is in their literature. It's similar to ISIS. ISIS says they are fighting the infidels, and these people in the Azov battalion are an anti-Semite group. They are really racist against the Russians. They call them lots of names, and they dehumanize them, and they don't consider them humans. I mean, when the Russian soldier is captured, if he is a normal soldier, they shoot him in the leg, and if he is an officer, they shoot him in the head. And this is completely proven and documented, and we can see all these videos coming from Ukraine. But unfortunately, you were mentioning before I jumped in about censorship, and the online censorship is horrible, and we know how they can manipulate the algorithm. Like, my channel has now 34,000 subscribers, and how is it possible that 1,000 to 2,100 people only can see the content that I'm posting on YouTube, right? So there are certain techniques of suppression of content when you're talking about quote unquote sensitive issues. And even before you post your video, YouTube asks you before you monetize it, they ask you, are you talking about sensitive issues? It's like, what is a sensitive issue, bro? It's like, I'm posting political content. Of course, it's gonna be sensitive. I'm not gonna talk about. I'm not gonna talk about my gym, what I did in the gym, or what I did with my dog. It's a political content. What do you expect? Of course, it's gonna be sensitive, right?
Right? That's so ridiculous. Yes. Yeah. They're suppressing anything. Like I said, they suppress anything that that's outside the lines, outside the approved narrative. And you're right. It's not just, I think this is important for people to realize. It's not just like hard censorship where, hey, my video got taken down. A lot of what Kevork is talking about too is happening where it's like the soft censorship where it's algorithmically your video gets buried. As he said, he has 30,000 plus subscribers and only like maybe like 1,000 people might see his video. Like if you want to see his videos, you have to actively seek them out. Otherwise they get buried. And that happens across the board. And there's a lot of that kind of soft censorship thing happening, right? It's nuts.
And you can simply notice people with similar subscription numbers. You can see like their videos have been watched by 30,000, 40,000 people. And they're talking about the same topic, but from a different perspective. So because my channel came under attack, especially by these Bellingcat, these guys, they're funded by NATO and they're doing quote unquote journalism. So they mentioned my channel and they said like, I'm getting funding from a source which wasn't the funding. It was an award that I won from the Syriana SHIM award. And they, because of the award, I got 5,000 euro, like for the entire year. So they consider that funding, which if I compare that 5,000 euro per year to their funding, it's like 0.05% of their funding, right? And they still feel obliged to write about it because they open the eyes of these so-called narrative controllers in YouTube and on Facebook. And if Facebook and YouTube haven't heard about you, if Bellingcat writes about it, of course they will, because they are close to NATO. And all the journalists that they mentioned, I'm sure they are all now in one way or another shadow banned, and we cannot know if we are shadow banned or not. Like there is no tool that they tells you, you're shadow banned. Unlike Twitter, there are some websites that you can check yourself if you're shadow banned. So it's really ridiculous, and this is not only in online platforms now, in daily life basis. I'm not like writing pro-Russian things on Twitter, for example. I'm just trying to say, guys, there are two sides of the story, and it's really not a good idea to send weapons to the neo-Nazis. Where is the really controversy about this, right?
Right.
The same way I was saying, guys, if you send weapons to these radical jihadists in Syria, you will receive a blowback because Syria is on the border with Turkey, and Turkey is a NATO member. And then during the refugee crisis, lots of ISIS and Nusra and other terrorists, they sneaked among the refugees and they arrived in Europe and they did terrorist attacks here, right? And now they're sending weapons to this Azov battalion. And like in the past 11 years, haven't we learned anything? It's like from Syria, when I watch what's happening in Syria, what happened in Syria, and now what's happening in Ukraine. These weapons that they're sending to Azov battalion, when they feel they're losing, they're going to sell it in the black market. Sooner or later, the people will realize there are Stinger missiles being in the black market in Poland, in Czech Republic, and maybe later even in Germany. Do they realize how dangerous it is that these crazy guys that they send weapons to Syria, they're using American weapons to gun down civilian airplanes in Syria, in Damascus and in elsewhere. So are we going to talk about this? If we send them E-glass, for example, the anti-aircraft missiles that they're sending them that can be carried on a shoulder, do they realize how easy it is to take down civilian planes with that missiles. It's not over Ukraine, but if it goes to safer countries like Poland or elsewhere, it can happen. And if it happens, who is going to bear responsibility? So I think the so-called liberal elites, like I always say, the so-called, because they're not liberals, these people, they just consider such accidents as a collateral damage. Like supporting radical jihadists in Syria, and then in the course of 10 years, 500,000 people died in Syria because of them, of what they did in Syria. But if 200, 300 civilians die in Europe because of this, let's say, the blowback, it's fine for them. It's not comparable, right? They can sacrifice these people for the sake of a big strategic goals elsewhere. So I think they're doing the same in Ukraine. They don't care about their people. If they do, they should really address the inflation now, because the people, I'm thankfully still able to finance my basic needs, but there are people who are in a poorer, let's say, classes. And what about these people?
I know.
Why would anyone be like send taxes or money to Ukraine if he can't really afford his basic necessities? That's why they censor now the media, for example, Russia Today, Sputnik, and even other independent media outlets, because they don't want their people know that there are two sides of the story. It's not a cartoonish black and white picture.
Right.
And maybe, just maybe, Russia has some legitimate concerns in Ukraine.
Yes.
So if the people realize that, they will ask questions. Why are we sending weapons and ammunition there if Russia has these concerns, 1, 2, 3, which if it happened in Germany, we could also have the similar concerns, right?
Yeah.
Including like the oppression against these Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. It is because we are in a 21st century and we have so many social media, etc. Only because of that, we haven't seen all this, the oppression practiced by the Ukrainian forces against the Russian-speaking people there, because they made sure not to record it on videos. But there were so many incidences until this moment against the gypsies, against the Russian-speaking people. They treat them even below animals, because for us, for any decent human being, animals are really expected, and we don't treat them like inhumanely, right? But they even treat these humans below how they treat the animals. It's so horrible. If people want to learn about it, just go and write on Twitter or on Telegram and search for these videos on the gypsies and how they treat these gypsies in Ukraine. You could cry, really. They're kids below 18, 15, 14 years old girls being held against their will, and they're like with stickers. They first of all, they paint their faces with green colors, and then they humiliate them and they stick them on the wall or something, and they start to humiliate them, sexually assault them, etc., etc. I have even seen a video, which of course we cannot post them on social media. The Azov battalion were crucifying Russian-speaking rebels in Donbass. So when they captured a prisoner of war, they crucified them. I mean, we've seen these things in Syria when ISIS did it. But these people, they are like blondes, blue eyes, so we cannot really say that they're terrorists. No, they are terrorists. They are terrorists.
Yes, absolutely.
The color of the skin plays no role.
No, it shouldn't, but it does. I mean, it's been very fascinating to watch people justify, some of this stuff, because, these are white, blonde hair, blue eyed people. They have Netflix. They're civilized. It's so disgusting. But we do have to take a quick break. Mm-hmm. Everybody hang tight. We're going to be back with more from Kevork Almassian right after this here on TNT Radio.
You should hear what Jesse Zerowell is talking about.
I wholeheartedly stand behind that, and I've been really galled by the increasing rhetoric about how this is what's happening in Ukraine is part of the Great Reset agenda. And some people even going so far as to say that all of this is staged or phony or orchestrated. what I just read is your response to that, but maybe we can talk about that a little bit, because I think it needs to be addressed and put in its place.
It's being amplified by the media discourse, of course, Western media discourse, which are eliciting sympathy for Ukrainians because they're white, they're blue-eyed, they're blonde-haired, they look like us, they dress like us. I mean, this kind of language is actually being used, which is, I mean, it's racism.
Jesse Zerowell on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
The United States government has declared you an enemy of the state. For the first time in history, a foreign journalist has been charged under the U.S. Espionage Act for publishing truthful information about war crimes. If convicted, our right to free press is over. We have been led to despise the journalist charged by a massive smear campaign directed at both the left and the right, yet his record speaks for itself. He's the only journalist to have never gotten it wrong. The charges are opposed by all major human rights and free press organizations, but our once trusted news outlets have failed to inform us. It is not too late. We can demand the UK stop the extradition of journalist and publisher Julian Assange. We can demand the Department of Justice drop the charges. Call UK Home Secretary Priti Patel at 020-7219-3528 or call the Department of Justice at 202-514-2000. They are not after him. They're after us.
Here's that song again. Here's that song again. For the 100th time today. Here's that song again. It's gonna be stuck in your head all day. Here's that song again. It will make you cray, cray.
You love your kids enough to watch that TV show a bajillion times. Love them enough to make sure they're in the right car seat for their age and size. Show them you love them. Keep them safe. Visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Get breaking news on your phone when it happens. Download our app from the Google Play and App Store now.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Hello, this is in fact TNT Radio, and you are listening to The Misty Winston Show. And this hour, I am joined by Kevork Almassian, who is the founder of Syriana Analysis. And before the break, we were talking a little bit about the kind of ridiculousness of the narrative surrounding Ukraine. And you mentioned that, you know, it's not like we don't have historical context for what we're doing, right? We did it in Syria. And it's been very frustrating for me watching the people of the West, in particular the United States, that's where I live, watching people fall for this all over again. You know what I mean? Like watching people buy into this hook, line, and sinker all over again, despite the fact that we have a ton of historical context that this is nothing more than a proxy war, and that obviously we don't care about the people of Ukraine. We don't even care about the people of this country. President Biden doesn't care about, as you said, if he did, he'd be addressing inflation or homelessness, or we'd have a jobs program, or our education would be. I mean, it's, we're sending $40 billion to arm Nazis instead of helping our own people. So, what do you think about that? The idea that this kind of propaganda and this kind of, manufacturing of reality is working yet again.
The thing is, anyone who followed the war in Syria, for example, and before that Libya, you can see the pattern in the way they manufacture consent, right? Through the propaganda and emotional sentiments, and so much reliance on the music, the background music, the montage, and everything. But in the past 10 years, all this, when we watched all these reportages, and now we compare them with Ukraine, we realize something. Yes, the American mainstream media, the European mainstream media, they are really strong, but they're not creative. They're repeating similar techniques and they're following similar script. It's like, into extent that it becomes really laughable for anyone with minimum critical thinking skills. And you can see that, like when the war started in Syria, they were all the time talking about that somebody among the inner circle is going to kill Assad, somebody is going to replace him, somebody is going to poison him. And then Assad has mistrust issues with in his inner circle, with his brother, with his vice president. And then, like, it's exact the same script. They just changed the names in Russia. And then Putin has no trust in Shoigu. and then Shoigu is going to poison Putin and somebody is going to kill him. It's like you can just put all this together and you see, yes, it is effective for propaganda, for programming the masses. But any serious person can understand the amount of the propaganda they're doing in Ukraine. It's unbelievable. But they made the people zombified, especially after the corona pandemic. They fear-mongering against the people made the people voluntarily give up their rights, right?
Yes.
And they told the government, you think for me and I follow you. And this Ukraine war came. Yeah, they were only a matter of 2 weeks between this. Like there's this joke on Twitter. They say Dr. Vladimir Putin single-handedly finished the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah.
It's like, do the people realize that when the coverage was over on corona, there is no pandemic. The people cannot feel there is a pandemic, right? And now it's the same. If the propaganda stops in Ukraine, there will be a chance for diplomacy. There will be a chance for both sides or all sides, because there's so many players involved in Ukraine, can sit and talk, because when there is no propaganda, the people will not support America sending 40 billion to Ukraine. No. If there is no propaganda, nobody will accept. I was just now in the shopping, and the nuts, the nuts is like, it was €3 and now it's €5. It's almost 40% more expensive, right? And you have to ask, I'm just really like, why I didn't buy it, because I know it's really too expensive, and also you're more or less paying for a war that Germany wants to participate in. And when I say Germany wants to participate, I think it's not entirely correct, because the Americans were really lobbying in Germany before the elections. They wanted the Social Democrats to come to power, and they wanted the Greens to come to power. And don't get me wrong, the Greens in Germany are completely different from the Greens. I think the Greens in the United States are more or less, I'm not an expert, but I think they're not warmongers.
No.
In Germany, the Greens are pro-NATO more than the NATO General Secretary himself. And they came to power selling all these environmental cliches for them, because they don't really mean it. They just wanted to stop the Nord Stream pipeline with Russia, because they were quoting environmental concerns, but for them it was political. And two, when they came to, but they also said they don't want to send weapons to war zones, and they came to power. And the foreign minister, she is from the Greens, and now she's the one asking Germany to send more heavy weapons into Ukraine. And they're the ones who stopped the Nord Stream. The guys from Russia. So Biden has, or the Democrats in the United States, they have a really good relations with the Social Democrats and the Greens. And I'm afraid to say, if Angela Merkel, despite all the criticism that we did to Merkel for her certain policies, but if she was in power, I don't think she would go this far in this war in Ukraine, because she preferred the diplomatic approach in Ukraine. Yeah. And she signed, her country signed on the agreement between because they sponsored an agreement between Russia and Ukraine, right? And now these Social Democrats came, they turned the table upside down. So it's really interconnected, right? When Biden arrived in Germany, the parallels of the Democrats, the copies, right? They came to power in Germany as well. And now, I mean, I'm really surprised sometimes, because some of my also good friends, German friends, they're like really unhappy with my opinions on the Russian, the Ukrainian conflict. And some of them are now even telling me, why am I living in Germany if I would have such a position? And of course, it's a childish argument from them, because there is no permanent foreign policy that could be like, there is no country that has a copy of a foreign policy that comes with it, right? The politicians change, the parties change, and I'm like telling these guys, do you really understand how much are you going to lose because of your stubbornness regarding Russia? Everybody knows, any geopolitical expert who knows ABC of geopolitics know that closer relations or good relations between Germany and Russia will definitely shift the balance of power from the American side into the Russian side. And it is a very big taboo that nobody can surpass this. Nobody is allowed to have good relations with Russia. You should have okay relations. Good relations means Russia will sell more gas to the German market, and that means Germany will be more dependent on the Russian energy resources, and that means more Russian influence in Germany. And the Americans know that. They have 60,000 soldiers here, and they have nuclear weapons here. So for them, sabotaging the relations between Russia and Germany is of higher priority. And two, people in Germany also really, most of them, they don't know that there is a tacit conspiracy against them. The Americans are doing the Biden administration is working to deindustrialize Germany, because without the Russian gas, there is no industry in Germany. And because the Greens came to power, they are saying, we're not going to run the coal energy and the nuclear energy because we are pro-environment, right? And if there is no nuclear energy and no coal energy and no gas, so what happens to the industry of Germany? It's a serious question. So they want Germany to stay an agricultural economy.
That's a great point.
That could be, and that could be always under the umbrella of the United States, and to keep Europe under the leadership of France and Britain, not Germany. Germany should always stay weak, just like Poland, just like Ukraine, because these three countries, Germany, Poland, and Ukraine, are they are the bridge, the territorial bridge that the United States can project its power and hegemony on Russia. And through these three countries, the United States can reach the heart of the world, as Brzezinski calls it. And through these three countries, they work to cause ethnic and sectarian and religious troubles in Russia in order to divide Russia on ethnic and sectarian and other nationalist basis, right?
Yeah.
So Russia knows this. And for Russia, I mean, they try to say, like, this is Putin's war. I mean, if anyone beside Yeltsin, who was a drunk guy who would be in power in Russia, would not tolerate Ukraine being a NATO member. There is no way. It's like putting your missiles in Cuba or in Canada and expecting the United States not to react. We remember, I think it was in 1968, right? When the United States and the Soviet Union were very close to a nuclear war against each other. And one of the reasons was because the Soviet Union tried to install missiles in Cuba. So we know what could happen because of this. So both sides should really respect the national security concerns of each other, not to provoke. But nowadays we are living in a circus, really, like Biden, as if it's not enough. As if it's not enough what we have now in Ukraine, and he's like, I'm gonna defend Taiwan against the China.
Oh, God.
Do they really realize what are they doing? They are bringing Russia and China closer together. Something never happened in history. Never, because both countries always have their independent projects. They never had something mutual together. Both have international aspirations, but individually. They never came together and joined forces together like it's happening now. And because of the stability of the Biden administration, they're bringing both sides closer together. And I don't like to make predictions, because last time I predicted I was wrong. But I think sooner or later China will conquer Taiwan under the One China initiative that they have. Taiwan is under international law and under the Constitution of China. It's part of China. It has its independent administrative character and some policy independence there, right? Or autonomy, let's say. But it's part of China. And the Americans respected that for a very long time. And Taiwan doesn't have a seat in the UN, right? And now they're like, oh no, we want to bring Taiwan into the UN. Like as if they're inviting China to invade Taiwan or to conquer it, right? So if they lose Taiwan and they lose Ukraine, I think it's the beginning of the end of the American supremacy on international level. So
I think we're already going down that slope for sure. We're already going. I think we're already. Listen, the American. Listen, I'm a big fan of that because the American Empire has been the world's largest terrorist organization for a very long time. And listen, I'm an American. I don't hate America. I don't hate Americans. But I strongly dislike our government. I strongly dislike our systems. I strongly dislike the way that we present ourselves to the world, the way that we conduct ourselves in the world. We brutalize countries all across the globe and act like we have the right to. I mean, it's as if like we're doing right now with Ukraine. That's not our business. Mind your business. You aren't even handling your own country. Why are you getting involved in other people's business? You can't handle your own stuff. Yes, exactly.
Because it's an empire. I think it was Chomsky who said, most Americans do not know that their country is an empire, and they don't know that they don't know. Something like this, right? Why would they?
Well, I mean, we're brainwashed. We're brainwashed, Kevork, in this country. From the minute we exit the womb, we are brainwashed to think that this is the greatest country on earth and that we are spreading democracy and freedom around the world, and that we only do good things, and that is beaten into us all throughout our lives. And so, a lot of people not only do they not know that they live in an empire, but I don't think that they want to know. I think a lot of people find comfort in that American exceptionalism, and they like feeling like they're the good guys. I hate to tell you, we're not the good guys. We're never the good guys, ever.
I would
ever.
Just a spoiler alert, guys. Believe me, I was born and raised in Syria, and I have an Armenian background, and I would say nobody cares about the way of life in the United States. Nobody cares about the freedoms there, and nobody wants to threaten the freedoms in the United States. They just want to be let alone.
I love it, Kevork. I love it because they do that a lot. They say, "Oh, they hate us for our freedoms," right? And it makes me laugh every time because they'll say that and then they'll use that threat of quote unquote terrorism to take away our freedoms. Yeah. And I'm like, "What freedoms? We don't have any freedoms left. What do they hate us for? There's nothing left to hate us for." It's so absurd. Okay, we have to take another quick break. Everybody, hang tight though. We're going to be right back after this here on TNT Radio.
It's finally happened. A major medical journal has published a dissent of COVID policy, calling it, quote, one of the most manipulated infectious disease events in history characterized by official lies, unquote.
From Washington, D.C., this is the Morono Minute with your host, TNT Radio's Mark Morono.
The Journal of Surgery Neurology International published an April commentary by neurosurgeon Russell Blaylock. Blaylock was scathing in his criticism of the COVID lockdowns. He explained that for the first time in history, medical treatment protocols were being formulated based on not on the experience of physicians, but on individuals and bureaucracies that have never treated a single patient, citing Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, the CDC, and WHO by name. He also warned that we'll never have a return to normal and warned of a great reset that has been designed to create a new world order. Bets are being taken as to how long the journal will be allowed to keep this commentary up. It's finally nice to see doctors, medical professionals speaking out against COVID tyranny. For the Morono Minute, this is Mark Morono on TNT Radio.
I came to clean and noticed there was no food in the house.
She told me her sister just forgot to pay a few bills.
He was in for his monthly trim when I noticed the bruising.
Is there anything I can do?
Thousands of older Australians experience elder abuse every year. If you're concerned about someone you know, you don't need to have all the answers. Call 1-800-ELDER-HELP for free confidential information and support.
For the news and talk you can't hear anywhere else, it's TNT Radio.
Hello, it is in fact TNT Radio, and this is the Misty Winston Show. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm joined by Kevork Almassian, who is the founder of Syriana Analysis, which is an excellent outlet. He does a lot of geopolitical analysis, and it's really important work, especially now given the fact that we can't get anything other than the approved establishment Western narrative for anything going on in the world. So it's really frustrating. But we were talking a bit about diplomacy and about how everybody pretends like we care about the people of Ukraine. And if we cared about the people of Ukraine, wouldn't diplomacy be like the first, that would be like number one priority is to attempt diplomacy? And instead, at least in the United States, they're actively working against that. And there's really no conversation about helping to engage in diplomacy and to, bring peace because this is a proxy war. And that's the reality of it.
It's a really big arrogance, I would say, from the elites in Ukraine. They know if they lose Ukraine, it's as I mentioned, it will be a major blow to the American hegemony in Eastern Europe. And they know if they lose Ukraine, Russia could project also its power and its influence over Poland. So we are talking about very Americanized countries here. And therefore, the American, let's say, establishment do not want to lose this war, and they would do anything possible, I would say, to prevent that. Therefore, when I said the American hegemony is in decline, it's also scary. Believe me, because these power-thirsty people, they would do anything to keep their status and their welfare, right? And I'm afraid, really, it could lead to nuclear war because if these people feel like their empire is sinking, they could go to the last resort, the last option, which is nuclear warfare. And millions of people will perish because of an arrogance of a side that is not willing to accept growing powers such as Russia, such as China, such as India, Brazil, and other countries into international community, such as Iran, for example, that is a really strong country in the Middle East. They always try to bring these countries on their knees if you don't follow their foreign policy. I've been watching a few, let's say, political commentary and analysis videos from India, and I was really surprised and shocked how the Indian journalists are talking about the American exceptionism, for example. And they're really frustrated because they're treating even India like a slave country. It's over 1 billion people there. And they're raising their finger and saying, if you still continue buying gas and oil from Russia, we will do this and we will do that. I mean, these people also have a pride. They really don't know. They don't understand the mentality of the Eastern people. Like they really they care about their pride. They're really emotional people. Do not raise your finger like that to 1 billion people country, right. And then also against China. What are you doing? You can include these countries into international community, the so-called international community, which is like a few countries nowadays. But if you include these countries into international community and give them access to decision-making, there will be lasting peace. Believe me, if these countries get along together, there will be lasting peace. But if there is peace, who's going to sell the weapons? Serious. Right. It's a serious question.
There it is.
It's a serious question. The people should understand that, Julian Assange, when he said the Afghanistan war is not meant to be win, it was meant to continue and stay the way it is because it's the biggest money laundering operation ever. People thought he's fooling. He was correct. and see what happened after 20 years of occupation of Afghanistan. The only people who lost are the taxpayers in the United States and the Afghani people. And now, if there is a transparency in the United States, we want to see the bank accounts of these people who sold the war in Ukraine, in Afghanistan. We want to see that. How did they, I was reading the other day about Speaker Pelosi and how many million dollars that she have comparing her salary. So how did she make that money? Seriously.
Right?
I mean, how from where, if she's working full time in that job for a very long time, right? So it's crazy. The propaganda against the American people, I know it because I also have American family members. They are also from my flesh and my blood, and they live in the United States. And when I talk politics with them, I feel like, oh my God.
I know.
An 18-year-old grad person in Syria can really understand better international politics than the average 40-year-old of my relative in the United States.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it's meant to be like that. It's not like an accident. It's meant to be like that. Otherwise, how would you fool your people to go to war? How many wars in the past 2-3 decades, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Libya, from Syria, now in Ukraine? And among these conflicts, there's so many coup d'etat attempts, so many color revolutions. It's like these CIA guys, they're working 48 hours, 24 hours. And it really makes me irritated because we paid a really huge price. Like in Syria, we lost everything. Like our cities are gone, our memories, our civilization, the ancient towns, and all these antiques that ISIS stole. When what was his name? This John Kerry, when he was a foreign minister, he was meeting with the opposition, so-called opposition members in the United States. And some of them obviously was recording the meeting on his mobile with a voice recording, and then sold it or maybe sent it to WikiLeaks. It was like, he's like very easy about it. Oh, we were watching ISIS advance from Palmyra to Damascus, and we thought we could do pressure like that on Assad for him to compromise. Like they were using ISIS against Assad for him to compromise. And then, I mean, what do we expect from such minded politicians, right? It's sick. It's very sick.
They're psychopaths. They really are. They're psychopaths. 100%. You're absolutely right about that. And you're right also, too, to say that in the West, it is very much by design that the average American citizen has no idea what's happening in the world around them. Foreign policy is very rarely covered. And when it is, it's done in a very disingenuous and misleading way. We don't see the realities of war anymore. They learned a lot from Vietnam. In Vietnam, we used to see, we would see the ramifications of war. We would see the body bags coming home. We would see the bombs and the devastation that they caused. And that is what helped lead to the uprising against the war in Vietnam. And so they don't show us that stuff anymore. So the American populace is very removed from the realities of war. They just don't understand. They just don't get it.
Comparing to Germans, a lot of Germans, they really understand what's going on. And some of them are really honest with me. They say, yeah, we know what happened in Iraq. We know what happened in Syria. But we don't care. It's far away from us. Really, they said, they told me directly, we don't care what happened in Syria. It's far away. It doesn't affect us. But Ukraine, no, we cannot allow this to happen.
Yeah. Yes, but it does, though. So, what happens in Syria does impact us. That's what's so frustrating, is when people are so far removed from their own humanity that they don't see how everything that we do impacts us in some way. It may not be direct. It may not be in a way that we can, really tangibly see. But absolutely, what happens in Syria impacts us. What happens in Somalia impacts us. Our imperialism around the world impacts every single American citizen, every single German citizen. It impacts all of us in ways that we may not even be able to understand, but it absolutely does. There's no question. So that is a very frustrating thing to hear, that people just don't care because it's far away.
I mean, they should because because of the UCIA regime change war in Syria, there is 2 million refugees now in Germany.
Right.
And some of these Germans who say now we don't care what happened in Syria, they are against receiving refugees in Germany. So I don't really understand how do you don't care about what happened in Syria, and at the same time, we don't want to receive refugees in your country. It's either this or that. If you really don't care about what's happening in Syria, then do not protest about receiving refugees. If you care, then stop the war so that no refugees can come in Germany. I don't understand what's really controversial about this. People accuse me of being a radical fascist and right-wing because I said this. It's like, stop the war. No refugees will come in Germany. If you're really bothered about the refugees, then stop the war. Really, it's like it's that simple. I don't understand. Don't protest then. Say, oh, we don't want to receive the refugees. But bro, you were supporting the war in Syria. How would you not receive the refugees? Shut up, really. You did not support the war.
It is ridiculous. You know what? It's so frustrating to me when people complain. Like, listen, we don't have. We're in the United States. We don't get a lot of those refugees because we're an entire ocean away. But when people in Europe complain about the refugees, but they don't actively fight against the wars, you need to snap out of it. Because if you don't want refugees, then stop blowing people's countries up. It's really that simple. Yeah. Stop destroying other people's countries, and they won't have to flee and try to find somewhere else to live. It is really that simple, everybody. It's that simple. So yeah, that's a very frustrating position when people say that. And I hear that all the time. And it's like, are you just incapable of making that connection in your head, or what is going on there? There's some kind of disconnect up there in your brain where you're just not getting it. Okay. So we have a couple minutes left. Tell everybody where they can find you and where they can find and support your work. Because it is, again, we need to support independent journalism now more than ever. It is a really desperate situation out there. So tell everybody where they can find you.
First of all, I'm really thankful that you hosted me on your show again. It's a really pleasure to talk to you. If the people want to support my work, they can find me on YouTube called Syriana Analysis. I'm posting 3-4 videos per week about the current affairs in Ukraine, in Syria, Middle East, lots of places, commentaries and analysis about what's happening in the world. I'm trying to bring the different, let's say, perspective of what's happening around the world. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. Nobody is 100% correct, right? And through my YouTube channel, they can find all the links in the description from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere I'm on Syriana Analysis. Also on Patreon. Most of my funding is coming from Patreon by very generous people. But if you collect, let's say, €2 per person, it really makes a difference at the end of the month, which also helps me continue and bring more content to the people, because what I really basically care is to be 100% independent of myself, so that I can be 100%, let's say, full-timer on YouTube.
Yes. And that way you don't have the influence of, all those corporate sources, and you can really just be, only beholden to your patrons and the people who are supporting and subscribing to your work. And I think that's so important. And it's really difficult for people to do that. So please, everybody go. If you're able to contribute, please do so. And if not, even just sharing the work is very helpful. As Kevork said earlier, we have to fight with that algorithm. So sharing the work is super helpful. Kevork, thanks so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And everybody just hang tight for a couple minutes. We have more coming at you right after this here on TNT Radio.